The drum set developed as an instrument along with the evolution of jazz. So I think it's important to have some background or understanding where this instrument came from, along with the development of music in the 20th century. I've been really out of touch with this side of my playing due to spending the better part of the last 12 years on the road with a rock band. And honestly, it's a lot of work to come back to a small jazz kit like this and connect with the touch and the feel. Even though there was a time years ago where I was working in jazz clubs and playing this music a lot. There's a certain touch on the drums and cymbals that's very unique to playing swing time, as well as the ability to interact and react, improvise constantly, and deal with really long up-tempo compositions. You can easily spend your whole life just solely dedicated to jazz and jazz-based music. And I recommend going to the masters to really delve into this topic. But you have to put your time in listening to the CDs, taking lessons, and playing this music and creating it with others. But I can make one general pointer to some younger, less experienced students of jazz. You always want to keep the forward motion going and pay attention to your ride cymbal and your strokes. It's where you state the time. Many high school jazz band drummers sound a bit like rock drummers, always playing the one and playing sort of blocky and playing a bit like this. One tip is to always keep the forward motion going with the anticipations and not blocking off the bars and the phrases and stating the one, like in rock music. Almost think of it like you're keeping a balloon up in the air with your hands and you don't want to let it touch the ground. Obviously, you can play the downbeats, but I like to let the music dictate if that's a correct move or not. But swing time should push forward, sort of like doom, This is just a general suggestion, and it's certainly not a rule. You have to listen to a lot of this music and play it with others and feel it. Listen to different drummers and pay attention to what they're stating on the ride cymbal. Some of my favorites are Tony Williams, Elvin Jones, Jack DeJohnette, Bill Stewart, Roy Haynes. I mean, I could go on and on. Also, if you can afford it, I recommend getting a little jazz kit with great jazz cymbals. This will help you with your sound and your touch, and you'll get inside things easier playing swing time on an instrument that's made for it. It's much more difficult to evoke the same vibe playing these feels on a 22-inch bass drum with a pillow in it, or a big, giant, loud ride cymbal made for loud amplified music. You wouldn't necessarily play a heavy metal guitar solo on a nylon string classical guitar. It helps to have the proper tools. But if you don't have a small kit or can't afford a second one, that doesn't mean that you should neglect exploring this idiom at all. Work with the gear that you have, and it might even make you explore different sounds, a different touch, and a different feel than you were previously experiencing on your present gear. brushes. I'll be honest with you, and honest with myself. I'm not going to set the world on fire and melt skulls with my brush ability, but I know my way around them. I've played countless cocktail gigs and weddings in my life, but these are an often overlooked item by a lot of young drummers in recent years, and that's really a shame. There's so much you can do with these things that go far beyond jazz ballads and country train beats. I've used them on recording sessions, as overdubs, scraping effects on cymbals, different textures, as well as more conventional uses. I urge every drummer to spend some time with these things. And really, there are far greater authorities than I had to go to for techniques and ideas with brushes. Many of the masters have entire books and DVDs on the subject. So really, the message here is to not to ignore these incredibly valuable tools that should have a place in every drummer's stick bag and musical vocabulary. This next song I'm about to play is called Together from Styx's Cyclorama CD. It's a song we all wrote in rehearsal hall, and it hasn't been performed since its recording in 2003. I've always liked the summertime feel of this track, as well as the conversational phrasing of Tommy Shaw's great lead vocal. The song starts just guitars and drums, and you'll notice that I'm just playing on the bell of the hi-hat, and the snare is struck lightly in the dead center of the drum, nice and easy. For the second part of the first verse, when the bass comes in, there's a light crash and normal hat and snare activity begin, and it gives it a nice scene change, and it helps with the build. Part of the bass line is contrapuntal to the bass drum part, which sometimes it doesn't work, but I thought with this track, the grounding of the one worked nicely with the anticipated bass line. Dum, 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 dum. There are kicks in the chorus on the ands of 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, And I thought it would be cheesy just to kick them outright for some reason. So you'll notice this motion where I keep the eighth note constants continuing on the hi-hat while just lightly hitting those crashes and hitting those kicks. This is a deceptively difficult slow mid-tempo, and it's really hard not to push it through the bridge and get excited in the guitar solo and through the end. It's a very tough thing to do. And you'll notice a few roughs on the hi-hat, and ghost notes on the snare, and a few tings on the bell, and just these little spices to make things interesting flavor-wise, without getting in the way or getting in the way of the lead vocal, or without drawing much attention to the drum part. The song really goes from a whisper to a roar, and again, I'm paying attention to shaping the overall song, reacting dynamically to the lyrics, and also playing a few motif figures in the same spots of the songs every time it comes around, and really trying to do my part to turn the seemingly sleepy little song into a party.
Rush down to the first floor. There never seems to be enough time. I push hard and push a little bit more. A cup of coffee and I'm gonna be fine. Fine as I could be now. Me and you, we do what we gotta do. We only wanna have a good life. It's tough, we don't see each other enough. Sometimes the going gets rough. Still we keep pushing on through. We could use another summer of love. It's cloudy here, but there's a blue sky up above. If we could only fly away from here, we could say goodbye to all the tears. and May. Yeah, but how much more can I take? I think back when I was a little kid. I did what little kids did, played war till I didn't want to play no more. And that's when love stepped in, changed everything again. It's never too late for a summer of love. Yeah, it's cloudy here, but there's a blue sky up above. If we could only fly away from here, we could say goodbye to all the tears, and maybe we could spend the rest of our years together. We could be together. These are crazy times. It's a different world. Well, that's okay. Let it be that way. We can lose our minds, or we can find our way. We can change our world, no matter what they say. If we could only fly, we could turn around and say goodbye to all the tears, and maybe we could spend the rest of our years together. We could be together. Now we can let the sun shine in together, and we can overcome and win together. We'll have ourselves a summer of love again. Together we'll be together.
Quick tip!
Here's a quick tip for you. If you're going to build a soundproof room like this one, whether it's in the house or a freestanding structure outside the house, or you convert your garage, my best advice is to spend the money and do it right the first time. A guy named Jeff Hedbeck designed my room in Los Angeles and my room here in Austin, and he can be reached at hedbeckdesignedacoustics.com. You know, you can save a lot of money by doing things yourself, but you really want to have some professionals involved, especially with designing it and getting a split duct air conditioning unit in, and just making sure you have the double doors and that you use all the proper materials. So do it right the first time, and that's a quick tip for you.
From the room, quick tip!
This next solo piece is based on a Brazilian carnival samba, or at least my take of a Brazilian street parade. And I'm trying to think percussively and trying to honor the lope that a Brazilian samba has. You know, the 1 and a 2 and a 3 is actually has this, and the 1E, a 2E, a 3E is, and there's lots of little, bending of the phrases that occur in that music. And I'm just trying to honor that and do my take of it. Again, I didn't grow up in Brazil. That was not my cultural experience. So Brazilian samba purists, please don't write me angry letters. It's just my take on it. I did play this music with a band in Chicago for many years. I was in a 13-piece Brazilian samba and salsa band, played all sorts of Latin music, and it did have a bit of a fusion-y flair, which I suppose this does. But I'm trying to think in long phrases and 4-bar and 8-bar phrases, sometimes over the bar line. There's a section where I'll play 5/2, which is an angular feel against the samba, da 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 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5, and then I'll accent maybe every third one and dip back in with a 1E, a 2E, and it's an interesting palette landscape to improvise with. And then I'll sort of bring the piece back to how it started to give it a full circle. fortunate existence to be working as a musician, no matter what level your gig is at. To make a living doing something you love is extraordinary, and is something many people on this planet will never know or experience. This is something that takes cognizant mental realization sometimes, because we all can get caught up in the doldrums of repetition or in the mundane act of loading in and out your gear. We have to be thankful for our talents and our ability to exist on them. I can remember vividly the end of my first tour with Styx in 1996. The last show was in Chicago at the Rosemont Horizon, a venue where I attended many shows in my younger years, including seeing Styx on the Paradise Theater tour in 1981. So here I was in 1996 on the return to Paradise Theater, and doing this tour with all the same staging and the same props. And I tell you, you never know what life has in store for you. And this last show was filmed and recorded, and as fate would have it, I was under the weather, and that night was far from my personal best performance on that tour. And now it was documented forever on DVD and CD. Such is life, but I digress. I was living in Chicago then, and at the end of that last night, I cleaned out my wardrobe case and I drove home. I didn't know if Styx would ever play again or if I would be involved at all, and normal life resumed quickly. 1 week later, I found myself in a tuxedo, loading my drums into a banquet hall called Café La Cave on Mannheim Road to play a wedding, a block down from the Rosemont Horizon. I loaded my gear through the kitchen and I set up. And I went out in front of the building for some air and I watched the cars file into the Rosemont Horizon. Metallica was playing there that night, and there were beacon lights moving in the sky, and I watched all the excited concert goers head towards the venue. It felt like my summer had been just a dream. But I found this scenario hilarious rather than depressing. That's showbiz, I thought, and I headed into a gig that I was happy to do. I was going to play music with some great musicians, and I didn't care that it was a wedding. There's often highs and lows to a career in music, as in life, and adaptability and flexibility are important attributes to have. I was just happy to be working. The song Tears of Joy is written and performed by Jerry Goodman, who's famous for his work with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, the Flock, the Dixie Dregs, and countless recording sessions and soundtrack work. Jerry is an absolute genius at writing beautiful pieces of music, often in challenging and sometimes angular time signatures. This particular track is in 13/8, or so Jerry says, but it feels more like 13/16 to me, but that's probably because Jerry's brain works faster than mine does. The eighth note rate is about here. Which moves pretty rapidly. You can break down the A section of the song by thinking of it as a bar of 7 and a bar of 6, a bar of 7 and a bar of 6. 7 and 6 equal 13. In the B section of the song, it flips to a bar of 6, then a bar of 7, a bar of 6, and a bar of 7, which changes the feel to a more triplet-y type of feel. Another way to break down any odd time signature is in groups of 3s and 2s. In this case, the A section is 2 2s and 3 3s. 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 got the got the got the bloody bloody got the got the place got in got the got. Or you can count it as 2 2s, 1 3, and 3 2s. 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 do got do got do got do blah da do got do got do got do got da and so on. The B section is broken down into 3 3s and 2 2s, which dramatically changes the feel. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2. Here's an example of playing in 13 with the A section breakdown, starting with a melodic motif. You have to make the translation from math to music and get comfortable with the shape of the time signature. You have to hear the pattern within the patterns. I can use the main melodic motif to help me through this, so I'm thinking musically and not just mathematically. This is a beautiful and emotional piece of music, and I want to interact accordingly, making complementary choices along the way. And it's not about trickery or trying to demonstrate how clever I am. That has no musical virtue and doesn't interest me at all. I want to be inside the piece and be part of the music, reacting emotionally through the entire piece, as well trying to rise to the level and challenge and beauty that the song Tears of Joy presents. I assume that many of you have had experience with common odd time signatures such as 5/4 or 5/8, 7/4 or 7/8 or 9/8, and so on. But many drummers' knees shake sort of at the prospect of time signatures like 21/16 or 19/16. Now, chances are you could go your whole life without ever playing a piece of music or getting handed a chart in these time signatures. But if you're interested in them, there's an easy way to at least get a handle on figuring them out. To hear the shape of these time signatures, you first have to figure out how many 16th notes you're dealing with. In 21/16 time, you have, well, 21 16th notes, 21/16. In a bar of 4/4, you have 16 16th notes, so you have to get 5 more to get to 21. So if you count it out, it sounds like this: 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1 2 3 4 5 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1 2 3 4 5 1E and a 2E and 3 and a 4 and a 1 2 3 4 5. The same process would take place for a time signature like 1916. Again, a bar of 4 would have 16 16th notes, so you need 3 more to equal 19. And I tell you, it's a daunting task for me to even attempt to demonstrate anything in 19 here, as Vinnie Colaiuta has brilliantly played this time signature, and famously so, on the Frank Zappa song Keep It Greasy from the Joe's Garage record. And I've never heard anyone play difficult time signatures as fluidly and as astonishingly as he does, you know, with over-the-bar line mastery and not stating the one and modulations and just overall improvisational brilliance. This is just a humble and basic demonstration to break down the figure to show the process. So the same process applies to getting to 19. 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1 2 3 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1 2 3 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a 1 2 3. Now, these time signatures are pretty rare, but at the very least, it's a fun exercise to attempt to try to get a handle on them, if only to expand your rhythmic vocabulary and your rhythmic abilities. In my personal experience, I've only been handed charts with time signatures like these maybe a handful of times. One in particular was for a feature film trailer that was by far the most ridiculous and challenging chart that was ever put in front of me. I literally thought the producer was kidding. It was insane. Anyway, I was happy that I put a little practice time in this area because I was able to complete the session and thankfully walk out of the studio with my pride intact, even if my brains were totally scrambled by the experience of reading that goofy chart. I get asked about double bass drums a lot, and really, in recent years, I haven't paid much attention to them or really worked on them. When I was 12, 13 years old, I was really listening to a lot of Steve Smith, Terry Bozzio, and Simon Phillips, and those guys were kind of my templates for double bass drum stuff. And I never really got into anything fancy other than right, left stuff, and really with the feet, I play mostly heel up. Kind of slide up the pedal, but really with stuff like I'm just kind of muscling that out, and there's really nothing fancy going on downstairs or like multi-strokes. But it's something I've maintained and works well in the context of arena rock, like playing with sticks, especially for endings of songs. But in my mind, I always had this little system that was just however many on top with the hands, however many with the feet. So 2 and 2 would be, whether it's one bass drum or 2, second bass drum. Now, what I'm trying to do there when I'm playing them fast is really muscle them out and get a nice level between the top and the bottom. I've seen a lot of people play like that, like their arms are noodles. If you're gonna pull out that lick and muscle that out. And it's not just playing loudly. You're really muscling that out and working on getting a nice balance between the top and the bottom. Let's change the numbers. Let's go 3 up top and 2 at the bottom. And being it's essentially 5 notes, it can work as a kind of a 4/3 in a groove, like. And again, adding conjunctions, doing other things, and always being aware where your rhythmic resolution point is. You have to be able to get out of it once you start the lick. To get back to the 2 and 2, my opinion, just my opinion only, but it always drove me crazy if I saw a drummer end on the 1 of playing a 2 and 2. I guess when I was growing up, some people called it quads. I don't know if that's really the name or not, but it drove me nuts if I heard someone end with a snare and a crash like this. To me, that sounded and felt like how I just made it look by being a... And when I was a kid, I thought, why not add 3 bass drum notes at the end and come out with a bass drum and a crash, like the way you would if you played... So... And really, you could practice coming out by... Again, that has more of a shape, and it hits the rhythmic resolution point the way you want it to. Let's play 4 notes on the top with the hands and 2 at the bottom. 6-note figure. Now, we could put in a 3-note conjunction. And also that leaves the other arm free where you could actually play a cymbal crash like... You could... Silence! You could also start it, not... With the hands, 1, 2, 3. Again, you have to be aware of your rhythmic resolution point, the 1. so on. I could keep doing variations of that all day, and then you'll be sitting there going, all right, mate, get on with it. But you can see that there's a lot you can do with 4/2. And then, of course, adding 4/2, or not 4/2, but 4 in the top, 2 with the feet, and 2 and 2. Fun. All right, well, let's keep going. 6 with the hands, 2 with feet. Again, you can mix that up with the other ones. And so on, ad nauseum. Here's one I like, 3 and 3, nice and even. Now you can also take this, change it up, and get some cymbals involved. Or add some conjunctions and play something like. Whatever. Again, just let your imagination run wild. All right, the last one you'll get the idea, because you could do 100 and 100, mix up any of the numbers that you wish. But there's another one with 2 in the hands, 3 in the feet. Again, a 5-note grouping. And a lot of this stuff is really good for endings of songs, big rock arena. And that's another thing, ending songs, right, left, right, with the feet. Digga-da. It's always my favorite. I don't know why I do it. Not always, but it pretty much telegraphs it, well, this is the ending, so it's time to clap. All right? So there's a little bit of the double bass stuff, and it's up to you to go have fun with it. Every musician has many pivotal moments in their life. One of mine occurred when my brother Joel came home with a Journey record called Evolution when I was 10 years old. Something about Steve Smith's playing spoke to me on a deep level, and I intrinsically knew that there was something going on there. My brother and I went to see Journey on September 1st, 1980, and my experience seeing Steve Smith live for the first time behind those beautiful oak sonorphonics was just colossal. I soon hunted down the Jean-Luc Ponty record called Enigmatic Ocean that he played on in 1977, and quite literally, everything changed for me. I started seeing the sun poke through the clouds, and I heard angels singing, and it just unlocked many mysteries for me. It was like the Rosetta Stone. I could hear sticking articulations, and I could piece things together that had previously eluded me. And I'm not sure why I was able to figure out so much of it, as it was very highly challenging playing. But I was able to listen to other drummers and figure out what was going on with certain figures and certain grooves after having had that experience. When I was 12 years old, I wrote Steve a letter through Modern Drummer magazine, and he wrote me back a handwritten 6.5-page letter with answers to all my questions, advice, and even a few transcriptions. And man, I tell you, you would have been hard-pressed to have found a happier kid on the planet that day. Steve told me to check out Tony Williams with Miles, and Elvin Jones with Coltrane, and Max Roach, and he told me to work on my swing time, and that would help me become a better rock drummer too. Well, not long ago, I found myself on an airplane writing on my laptop to a young drummer that had written me. And I found myself giving the same advice to this kid that Steve had given me. And it could have been the red wine, I don't know, but I was just overwhelmed at how amazing life can be, and how things can come full circle, and how what we give to others can send ripples over generations and touch others. And my eyes welled up, and I felt nothing but gratitude. Through the years, Steve and I have met many times, and he's always greeted me with a hug. Steve Smith's drum solo from the 1980 live Journey record, Captured, is really one of the all-time classic drum solos ever recorded. And I was lucky to have taped another show off the radio from that 1980 tour back then, so I had a whole separate version to listen to while I was growing up. This solo piece I'm about to play is very loosely based on his now famous double bass shuffle from that solo. It won't be as good, but it's the best that I can do. And we all have big bang moments that inspire us as drummers. Whether you saw Ringo on the Ed Sullivan Show, or remembering the very first time that you ever saw a drum set in person up close in front of your eyes. One of my biggest moments was seeing Steve play on that 1980 tour. So this is my humble attempt at honoring someone whose playing has meant so much to me. Steve did a tribute to the great Tony Williams called Thanks, Mr. Williams, on his DVD called History of the U.S. Beat. So this is called Thanks, Mr. Smith. I'd like to talk about the gear here for a few moments, and not for the sake of making it a commercial for the companies I endorse, but rather explain a little about why I have the gear that I do. I always found it interesting why drummers choose what they use. So this is a Pearl Masterworks kit, and it's one of 2 duplicate kits I received in 2001. So these babies have some miles on them. This kit here is 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 with a 20-inch bass drum. I just hoisted up on some tom stands for some fun. A little 12-inch snare drum, and this is a solid Masterworks rosewood snare drum. And I used a larger set on the road with sticks with a second 22-inch bass drum and another 8 by 8-inch tom sandwiched in between this 8 by 7 and 10. I'm actually much more comfortable on a kit like the one I have here, simply because I've spent more time on a kit this size through the years. And I use 2 bass drums on the road because A, I don't have to carry them, and it usually makes my kit bigger than anyone else who might be on the bill with us. Now, really, I just like the look and the feel of the big rock drum set for the big rock shows, and I don't know, maybe I feel a little safer hidden behind all the extra goods. But I think it speaks volumes of how I feel about these drums, being that I've used the same kit on the road for 6 years and over 1,000 shows. I've just recently received a brand new Masterworks kit, which has even slightly thicker shells with the same Babinga finish on the inside of the drums and 24 karat gold plating, like the drums here. And I got a gong bass drum as well. I went with the reference style bearing edge cut for really nice deep tone and a warmth out of the toms. And I gravitate towards thick shells, especially for the toms, because I think they produce a clear, deep, rich, fundamental note with ease. And the microphone reads that information really easily, and it sounds pure and natural. And while on some thin-shelled drums, I think the mic has a harder time making out a lot of the boingy overtones. And then that's when the engineer starts rolling off, EQing, rolling off frequencies, and then your drums really don't sound like your drums anymore. Now, some thin-shell drums are great. I actually used my 4-ply Masters Sunrise Fade kit on most of Styx's Big Bang Theory record, and they sounded just killer. But these drums inspire me to play just looking at them. And I think it's important to be inspired by your instrument. They should make you want to come over and hit them. And on the drums, I've always used Remo drum heads on my drums. I love clear ambassadors, tops and bottom of the toms, and I tune the bottom head just a little tighter than the top. And that gives the tom note a really nice dip in the pitch after the initial impact. Doom, doom, doom. And these heads just sing and give me the sound that I hear in my head. For the snare drums, I've always used coated ambassadors on the tops and hazy ambassador snare side. And the bass drum, I like a clear Power Stroke 3. And for playing big rooms and sheds and arenas, I like a Danmar kick pad, and I like putting a pillow in the bass drum. And I'm going for spike and for clarity. I kind of don't understand the big wide open bass drums and woofers in arenas unless you want your bass drum to sound like a bass guitar, or if you never play anything but slow quarter notes. But for me, I'm going for spike and for clarity, especially in some of the faster rhythmic figures. I've played Sabian cymbals for over 10 years, and they're just beautiful musical cymbals. On the road with Styx, I use larger models than I have here, with a 22-inch ride cymbal and a 22-inch China and 20, 19, 18, 17-inch crashes. And I'm using smaller models here because I thought that this would work better in the context of this DVD. So I've always enjoyed putting a family of cymbals together that works as a cohesive musical unit. And there are many different lines here. They don't all have to be from the same line. I mean, we have AAX, Vaults, HHXs, AAs, a Paragon, a prototype ride. And it's fun to put all these sounds together and really create your sound. You should be able to play melodies on these things. They're musical instruments. They're just beautiful musical symbols. I was recently turned on to Audix microphones from the engineer that recorded the Taylor Mills record. And I was skeptical at first to stray from my usual mic choices, but I fell in love with them, most notably the i5 for the snare drums, which sounds to me like a tweaked and dialed in 57 with no EQ right out of the box. And the SEX25s for the overheads, they're just really creamy and natural sounding. And our live sound crew with Styx fell in love with these babies too. The Babinga front bass drum head was done by Rob Warner at Head First, and they just do a really beautiful job. You can send them any photo or any design, and they'll put whatever you want on your bass drum head. And lastly, I developed my own stick with ProMark, the Todd Zuckerman SD330W, and it's in their autograph series. And there's a few things that make the stick a bit unique. It's not just another 5B with a signature on. For starters, it's maple, which is a lighter and less dense wood than hickory or oak. So I can get a really nice beefy stick that fills out my hand. And the measurement of the girth is .600 for you super techs out there. It doesn't have too much weight and it never feels heavy. So I can really play the sticks rather than them playing me. Another great feature is the maple tips almost never chip, which is amazing. You know, it's a drag to have a hickory stick with a lot of life left in it, but the tip chips, and then you're left with, you know, that dead sound on the ride cymbal, or, you know, you can damage heads easier. But these almost never ever chip. And these don't splinter off like hickory does either, so you don't have all the sawdust underneath your snare drum, and there's no more wood chips flying in your face either, which I like. I like them not flying in my face. They last as long as hickory in my hands, and when one breaks, it just snaps, and I grab another one. There's also a little bit of weight shaved off right before the bead, and that creates a nice balance for a good rebound, and it never feels too top heavy, so I can, you know, even if I'm holding the stick really far back at the butt. For me, it's the stick I've always been searching for, and, you know, check them out. Maybe they'll work for you too. But it's been an honor and a dream come true to have my own signature stick, and a pleasure to be involved and associated with some of the nicest people on the planet at ProMark. Well, that's the gear spiel, and I'd like to thank Pearl and Sabian, Remo, Audix, ProMark, and Head First for all the years of support and friendship. Thanks, guys. Well, that just about wraps it up. And I know what you're thinking. Did he really buy the same shirt in 3 different colors? Yes, I did. Well, I'd like to close with the Styx classic, Renegade. And this is actually one of the toughest things I'll have to do today, as I have to get into the headspace of a live concert that's already taken place. There's no click track going on here, and I have to try and gel with the ebb and flow that we were feeling as a band that night. And boy, were we playing the song fast at the time this was recorded back in 2000. It was a 100-degree night in St. Louis with high humidity, as I remember, which probably added to the peppy tempo. I probably wanted to get off stage and drink a lot of water. Anyway, it also features one of the longest endings, the ending fermatas in recorded music history. John Panazzo was Styx's original drummer, and he played a lot of interesting, unorthodox parts. So his templates that he left were interesting for me to do my own thing with and, you know, put my own thumbprint on. I always try to honor the original vibe of these famous songs, and I strive to update them, hippen them up a little bit, while still retaining the original flavor. I hope you enjoy it. I'd like to thank you for buying this DVD, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege to provide some ideas and guidance to help you on your own musical journey. It's important to always remember to have fun. Music is not a contest. Music is not a sport. Music is art. Music conveys stories and feelings and emotions, often with profound power. The power of music is extraordinary. I mean, you can hear a song that takes you back to your past with more sheer force than viewing a photograph. Music is art. And art is subjective, and there's not one artist who ever lived that didn't have detractors. So you have to forge ahead with all your being if you want to do this for a living. But if you don't end up doing this for a living, or you don't want to, still be involved with drumming. Be involved with music. Music keeps you young. Be involved with art and create. It's one of life's greatest joys and rewards. Find your thing, whether it's drums, guitar, painting, sculpting, knitting, whatever. Find your thing. And as a dear friend of mine once said, stay up late for your thing. Be a patron of the arts and pull yourself away from the TV screen or computer screen and go out and experience live music. Support live music. The arts are in danger in so many school systems, it's downright terrifying. Expose young kids to music and the arts early and often. Well, you've made it this far into the DVD, so that tells me that you're obviously committed to drumming, so you know how cathartic and therapeutic it is. I know for me, I can go into my drum room at 3 o'clock and begin to play, and seemingly, 20 minutes later, it's 6 o'clock. What an amazing out-of-body experience that is. What a beautiful thing. You know, it's just healing. If everybody in the world had something like that in their lives, man, what a different and better world it would be.